Welcome everyone. My name is Brett Gorman, and I want to welcome you to a US Rowing Pathways webinar on transitioning to the senior team. We're going to be reviewing essentially the pathway to senior team and really focusing on that post-collegiate space. We will talk a little bit about some U23 elements, but most of this webinar will focus on what happens after college. And we have our wonderful head coaches and our Chief High Performance Officer, Josy Verdonkschot, with us. And I'm excited to share what we have for you. So I'll go ahead and get going. Welcome, welcome. We do have a Q&A going. We're hoping to get through the slide presentation relatively quickly so that we can spend a lot of time with Q&A. And so joining us tonight, our panelists, as I mentioned, we have our Chief High Performance Officer, Josy Verdonkschot. We have our head men's senior coach, Casey Galvanek, who is also the head coach at the Sarasota Training Center. Head women's coach, Josy Foglia, who also is head of the Princeton Training Center. And then Minzner, our para-rowing head coach, who also heads up the Boston Training Center. So we're excited to welcome all of them. Additionally, joined by me, Brett Gorman. My role is Director of High Performance Pathways, U23, U19, basically everything before you get to the training centers, before you get to Jesse, Casey, Ellen, and Josy. We're also joined by Peter Quinton, 2024 Olympic bronze medalist, who is one of our athlete reps. And we should be joined shortly by Kate Nifton, who was part of our women's four that was also competing in Paris. So they'll be here to answer questions as well related to kind of the athlete experience in a lot of ways. So I'm excited that they're joining us as well. We'll go ahead and get into the areas we're going to cover. We're going to do a system overview at a glance, got a couple graphics to kind of visually show what we're trying to express. We'll talk about what we mean when we say senior transitions. We'll explain that a bit. And then we'll get into the differences between our training centers, our partner clubs, as well as other programs that offer high performance training. And lastly, we'll get into some senior team standards that we're looking to achieve. And as I mentioned, we plan to have plenty of time for Q&A. So please, as we're going, please populate that Q&A. And then when we get to the end, I'll be feeding questions to all of our panelists based on what's asked there, but we will hear from them as we progress. Josy, would you like to say anything before we get started? No, he does not. Okay, we'll get right into it. All right, so I mentioned we're going to start with a little bit of a system overview. So this is a graphic that we've put together to show what we're looking for. Oh, okay, great. I see that Kate has come in. Great. Oh, welcome, Kate. Hi, thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, everyone, we have Kate Nifton from the Women's Four. Great to have you here. As I mentioned, Kate, we're going to have some Q&A at the end where we hope you and Peter will be able to answer some questions for those that are on. So in this graphic on the left-hand side, we obviously have the collegiate sphere, and then we get into our senior transition, which this could mean several different things, whether it's a U23 team experience, a club program experience. One thing I also want to highlight is that we are supporting a World University Games campaign. That information is on the website, and I'll put the link in the chat towards the end of the webinar, as that's a new ad in the last month. And of course, various other development camps and other training opportunities that exist out there. And what we hope those lead to then is our training centers and athletes that are individual stipends. And really what that encompasses is our Olympic and Paralympic training pool. So I think I'll go ahead and go to the next slide because we're going to get into that a little further. And I'm going to invite Josy to come on and kind of define what we're going for there. So when we want to talk about what does the Olympic and Paralympic training pool consist of, this is what we're talking about. So Josy, do you want to speak to this a little bit on how we define that?
Yeah, sure. Basically, one of our targets is to make sure that we offer the best opportunities to the best athletes. In many ways, that would be bringing people together at our training centers, but obviously not everybody is, for many reasons. Let's say you are a singlist and you train with your coach and are of the right level. Probably you are part, not probably, also those people are part of our Olympic or Paralympic training pool. Same goes for people who train at certain high performance clubs. As long as there's a good understanding of those people, they follow the lines and they've shown their level, we consider them part of our training pool. So one could say it's hybrid, although that's only part of it, because people might train at different locations, or maybe even train at different training centers. That's not straight connected to what we consider to be the national team in the end, because you should understand, once we get to the senior level, a big part of our program is training together. And so more or less, most people will be together in either training camps or selection camps, or on a campaign to Europe for racing World Cups and or World Championships. Actually, not Europe this time, World Championships, but in China. So let's say 26 weeks a year, we are together, all of us, and the other 26 weeks, or maybe 22, people are training either at a training center or in some cases at home with a club where they've got more or less the same facilities, get more or less the same support as we think that they should get.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on a little bit to talk about what we mean a little bit more in depth about the senior team transitions. And as I think I've already alluded to, programs in a lot of ways are bridging the gap between the collegiate space and our training centers and getting to that point of being part of the Olympic and Paralympic training pool. So I think we've listed several examples here, whether it's a U23s or World University Experience clubs. Universities often offer summer development camps through USRowing, grad school programs, a Cambridge or an Oxford experience. And then, I think one thing that Josy, I think what you thought was important to mention was also a crossover athletes, athletes that come over from other sports, as we have seen across the world that can happen. And that we can see athletes that come from different sports and can succeed at this level as well. Move on. So a little bit more in depth about senior transition options. So I've talked about the U23 team, which, for those of you who don't know, we have a selection camp and a trials that qualify for the World Rowing Championships that will be taking place in Poznan, Poland this summer. We also have our high performance partner clubs, which I do have some subsequent slides that get into more about what defines a high performance partner club. But those clubs are very important within our system for training athletes domestically, and including especially for our speedors and possibly trials. I've already talked a little bit about the World University Games. That is a layer, I would say it's a little bit hard to describe, because on one sense, we'll have athletes that are invited to that don't qualify for the under 23 group, because that's a small group. At our selection camps this summer, we will only have 19 men and 19 women plus 2 coxswains per side for that. So that's a pretty small group in addition to the trials athletes. So the World University would have athletes that maybe are just below that, just missing that cut. The other thing that's unique about World University is that if you're aged out of U23s and you're too old, a graduating senior, the only requirement is that you have been in school within the last, I believe, year. So there are a lot of athletes that maybe are graduating this spring who are not eligible for U23s but could do a World University. And then this goes back into a lot of the other examples that I said on the previous slide, the dev camps, clubs with high performance programs, graduate school rowing, etc. I think for the next slide, we'll define a little bit more about what a high performance partner club is. And Josy, I would love for you to speak to this.
So basically, it's like this. If you look at most international federations and programs, people are able to bring together bigger groups, including their under 23s in training centers. And for many reasons, that's not the best solution for the United States. So if you would look at it, obviously you want to offer the best services and you want to make sure that you've got the best athletes. But there's two things. First of all, it's not the objective to bring everybody just to one spot, everybody of every level. You want to be sure that you offer the best services to the best athletes. And obviously there's also the age of high performance in what we do. You make sure that that you don't lower the bar too much, which means that for a lot of people like yourself, the first step would always be how to distinguish myself or yourself. And looking at it in that respect, high performance clubs are very important to us for two reasons. One is they make it, they offer opportunities for athletes who are not yet of the level to, to compete at the World Championships, but they find peers, and sometimes also find high performance athletes who are already at a certain level. So when we talk about a high performance partner club, we do not talk about all clubs that offer a high performance program, because there are many clubs in the US who want to support athletes, and there are many clubs that have the best of intentions. But basically, as an athlete, I would always start with 3 or 4 questions. One would be, who's training there? 2 would be, who's coaching there? 3 would be, what equipment is available? And 4, what about my life there? So looking at it in that way, there are certain clubs who have kind of a proven track record over the last Olympic cycle. They actually, some of our national team athletes are training there sometimes, or when they are not in a camp, they are training there. So at that point, athlete services, the program that they follow is just the same as the program is for the people that are training at a training center. However, in many cases, it makes sense to bring everybody together. So in our perspective, it is like, if there's no reason economically or socially or academically why you should be put at one place, we prefer people to come together. Best way to describe high performance clubs would be, high performance partner clubs would be going to the next slide, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at those clubs who really have had an impact and have really been a great support for our program over the last few years, it's obvious that Orion, CRC, Green Racing, and NYAC, New York Athletic, have a significant group of athletes. Sometimes they just train in the training center. Sometimes they still train at their club. But those clubs have been of great impact to our program and of a great support to our program. And I consider it to be a kind of a synergy. For instance, let's say let me be clear about this. I think that it is good that at some of those clubs, there's still high performance athletes with a great track record who have a very good reason why they want to stay at that club. The very good reason in general is economically or socially. And then that gives us a kind of a cross over and a good pathway for younger athletes who join those groups that are training there. So that's why I think it has a double function. One is, we can rely on them if we look at the program that people are following, the way people are coached, the way people are rowing, etc. On the other hand, it's a nice stepping stone for younger people. And obviously, there's many more clubs that offer a high performance program. However, I would always start with those 4 questions, and then I would say those clubs here, they fill in, they check the boxes. Yeah. Okay, Brad.
And then, as per what do you want to talk about this one, Josy, or do you want me to?
Because obviously not every club is the same, and the 4 clubs that we mentioned on the previous page is basically because they definitely had a number of people on the roster, and whether those people trained at their club all the time or whether they trained there for a certain period and then transferred to a training center, because in the end most of the Olympic preparation, let's say the last 8 months, we did all together. But if you look at other clubs, it's obvious that there's a number of clubs who are distinguishing themselves. Good examples are Penn AC. They've started a new program, and right now they've got a nice program, good group, etc. They've got good coaching. Same goes for Oklahoma. Same goes for Boston. Conshohocken more focused on sculling and under 23. But at least what is important for me is that it's not just a choice for like what's a nice city. If you really want to pursue a career in rowing, you have to look, where are my options? Where do I find my peers? Where do I find people who are challenging me every day to be on the same level? And so there's a wide range of high performance clubs. US Rowing has a long list of high performance clubs, but I would argue that right now, obviously, we've got specific partners that work with us closely together. We can say more or less the same of the clubs on this page. However, they do not have, so far they didn't have the same impact on the national team as the other clubs had. And we can read what Brad wrote here. It sounds nice. We appreciate the commitment of all programs that support HP rowers, and we want to acknowledge them all. And because we need more options for people like you, we need more places where people can find a good and nourishing environment to become better.
Mm-hmm. And in the chat, I put in the list of, we've updated the webpage to reflect the 4 HP partner clubs and then also the clubs that offer high performance. So the full list is in the chat for anybody who's interested in that. All right. Anything? Josy, I saw your mouth open. Anything else, or should we move on to standards? Good.
No,
okay.
but I was ready to talk about standards.
Oh, great. Okay, well, here, we'll just get right into it. No time to waste.
Okay. If you look at the career of a rower, one could say you grow, but you can reverse engineer and you can start from with the back, so with the end in mind, with your finish line in mind, and then you would say, so if your ambition would be at the elite level, which means at the Olympic level, to be top 3, what are kind of standards that we expect people to meet? Well, what you see here is men and women, elite, and then you see P-1, P-2, P-3, and P-4. The P- means so many years before the podium. So looking at that, one could say, so what do we expect of a male rower? What would be his performance on the erg if that person would be a potential medalist? We would say 545, corrected for his weight. We assume 210 pounds. For a woman, 635. That's what we expect of a podium candidate. Those are weight corrected scores because you know that boats are less forgiving for your weight than an erg. It's not that the weight is of importance, but it's just to be able to compare scores. We use that weight correction. Simple reasoning would be for every 2 pounds you're heavier, for a man, you should go about 0.6 faster. And for a woman, you should go about 0.1 second faster. And when you're lighter, it goes the other way around. Those are erg scores. When you look at the 100 meters, 60 seconds, 6K, it's percentages of speed. You take the calculator, you take your split, and you divide the split of your 100 meter by the split of 2,000 meters. You get a percentage. That gives you a kind of a profile. Then about the boat speeds, we look at small boats. I acknowledge everybody who had great performances in the 8 and in the Cox 4, etc. However, if you want to look at an individual, this is what we expect of people to be able to do. Looks like those are tough standards, but basically that's because it's a tough game. And if you want to be in a single or a double or a quad to medal, you cannot have people that don't break 7 minutes as a man, and you cannot have people that don't break 6:35 as a woman. The percentages behind that is we expect, so we are 3 years out of LA. So we expect that the average growth of a person could be 1%. Sometimes it's more, most of the time it's a little bit less. So if you look back, where you stand now, you can compare yourself to those standards and you would say, hey, I fit in here, and whoa, that's still a long road. Or you would say, hey, I can show this, bring it on, and come to the speed orders, and then we can see. So that's about the standards. Brett?
Awesome. And I think next we're going to get into a little bit of the para standards. And Ellen, I'd also love for you to highlight a little bit about how you see the para pathway as it relates, because, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are looking at this from a non-para standpoint, but knowing, especially when we talk about the PR3 and how you see that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the pathway for para is often more varied in terms of how many years we progress. We don't really have the external pathways of a U23 World Championship or U19 World Championship or even collegiate program dedicated to para. So I put these para erg standards, I'll just call them, but they're really more targets. We feel we are very competitive in the PR3 sport class. And so the 97%, that would be sort of international podium level performance. And these ergs are just targets. We know that they come from a variety of processes. The fixed seat athletes are going to come more specifically just club program to development camp to maybe a senior team trial, maybe another camp. PR3 should largely just be part of all of the systems already mentioned here. The top PR3 will be coming from collegiate programs, coming from our high performance clubs. We just had a strong ID weekend and a dozen or so new athletes, all from either collegiate programs or HP clubs. So PR3 athletes who may be listening should follow largely the same processes overall as are outlined for any U19, U23. It's where the, for para, the fixed seat is a bit different. We use the erg targets to identify, bring them to a development camp, and then hopefully work and invest in those athletes that we think have high potential for LA via invitations to come to the Boston Training Center, which is for Olympic and Paralympic, but has a little more specific coaching and engineering expertise for para. So I'll just kind of stop there on that one. These standards are posted for the boat classes. They're part of selection procedures in any case, and they can be reviewed at a different time.
Well, so I'd love to ask both of you. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off script here. I know you don't want me to do this because we got to get through the slides. But as you know, because I am in touch with a lot of U23 and a lot of these transition athletes, I'll ask a question that I'm sure is in some of their minds, like, but what? Oh, but I'm super fast on the water. Like what, you know, what for, you know, my boat moving ability, how is that factored in?
Are you asking me?
Sure.
Go to the next slide.
Oh, there we go. Yay.
Because how do you get in? Well, it's pretty simple.
Mhm.
By showing yourself. And so if you consider what are ways to show yourself, expose yourself to a selection camp for under 23 or World University Games, participate in national team testing, so submit your erg scores on the 2K and 6K, participate in small boat speed orders, fall speed order, winter speed orders, or participate in trials. Because basically for us, obviously we follow the collegiate season. We obviously we connect to collegiate coaches and to you know, to the coaches' organizations. However, probably you're not always aware of, let's say, that one athlete in Poughkeepsie, or I don't know where all those schools might be. You know, it's not always the big schools. And so in order to show yourself, we need more contact. And one part of that is showing yourself and show your small boat skills. If you're fast, there must be opportunities to show yourself. And again, I know that it's not easy, but that's why the high performance clubs, where the clubs with a high performance program come in, because training in an environment, getting acquainted with small boats, make sure that you can show yourself, have a decent erg score, but also have a decent boat speed. That's probably going to help you to enter in our training pool or get invitations for a camp.
And Brett, if I know that I haven't been called on yet, but just to sort of add to Yossi's point in terms of these entry points, I think one of the things that I often see or hear from athletes as they're sort of talking about their path is they often want to wait until they feel as though they're ready to sort of enter into any of these ones. And I guess I would challenge that and say, encourage you to, from the onset, begin on that path. I think one of the things that we're also monitoring is development and progress over time. If you're starting out, in the C final, and then over time moving towards the B final and hopefully the A final at a speed order event, or the testing piece, that's something that we definitely keep in mind. And I think if you're looking to develop over the amount of time that you need in order to be prepared to stand on a podium at the Olympic Games, it's going to require time. And the sooner that you can begin the process of entering into that system, the better.
Great. No, just please, yeah, jump in at any point. Casey, do you want to say anything at this juncture regarding senior team entry points? And, I get a lot of questions from athletes. They're like, oh, how do I get in? Like, it's, for us, because we're living with it and looking at it every day, it seems clear, but like, how do you answer that question?
Jesse always puts it so nicely. My big concern is just essentially mirrors what he says. Don't wait until you think you're competitive enough to go to a speed order or do the 2K and submit your times. Noting the progress is very important, and trying to limit the amount of excuses why you don't participate in one of the speed orders or one of the entry points is most important. It shows dedication to the goal, desire to move on. If your home club should be trying to present you, if that's the goal for you to move on, they should be trying to create an environment for you to be supportive in that endeavor. And then also, like, if you got the sniffles, it's probably okay to still come to the speed order. Let us know and communicate. That's the issue. But if you're finding excuses easily not to participate, then it's not a good positive thing for you. So
Great. Okay. Thank you. I see we did have a question come through in the chat. I'm going to wait till the end for that. We'll go ahead and we only have one more slide to go through pretty briefly, and then we'll turn our attention to Q&A. So we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to ask our coaches and Josy and Ellen to all, sorry, Ellen's a coach, to all talk through some training center goals for these 3 locations and where we see the trajectory of these training centers going. Josy, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, first of all, although the focus for Princeton could be women, it's open to everybody. Sarasota is open to everybody. What we try to do is to have multiple locations where people could train, in addition to the clubs where there's some, where in some cases people are still training. Our goal should be explained more explicitly by Jesse and by Casey and by Ellen, because from my perspective, it's always the same. What we want to achieve is create an environment, not of selection, but an environment of solid training and development of people. Okay, now I leave it to Ellen, Jesse, and Casey about training center goals.
Well, we'll go in that order. Ellen, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, sure. So Boston has a long, rich tradition of putting oarsmen and women on the podium, both on the Olympic and the Paralympic side. So Boston is the one training center that does feature para as a base. That just means we have a strong pool of coaches who have worked with the Paralympic athletes over the past 3 or 4 years. We also have PT specific to the para athletes, and team engineer that can work with seats and specialized equipment, and all of that sort of folds in to highlight for para. The main group of athletes that will be there this summer are the PR3. They'll run their selection camp there, and the goal would be, as we get closer to LA, to bring even some of the trials boat winners together in Boston to have that cohesive environment that will push everybody to succeed. We also have a great collaboration across the collegiate system there, as well as the Boston Rowing Federation, and putting scullers, elite scullers in the mix is that's kind of our goal there, and it's a great sort of collaboration, or just working in concert with all of the members in Boston that that really care about Olympic and Paralympic success.
Great. Thank you, Ellen. All right, we'll go to Jesse next.
I mean, I think in terms of goals, it's to create an environment where the best athletes have an opportunity to progress over time. I think to Josy's point, you know, one of the changes that we've seen in the way the system's been set up and structured over the last couple of years is that we've moved away from a centralization of men here, women there, and so on. And you know, I think one of the things that there's value in terms of being in Princeton would be that, you know, it's the central point for training, but also for a good part of our preparation and selection. So I'd say there's sort of two different junctures of the year. The first juncture would be laying the foundation and the structure in terms of providing the skills and direction for the athletes that are there to put their best foot forward. And then the second phase would be the process of making the national team. And, you know, that happens, you know, for the Olympic group, either in Sarasota or in Princeton, depending upon the year and the way the camp structure is set up. I mean, I think at a simplest level, what is the goal of our training centers? Well, it's to elevate our top athletes to the podium in Olympic class events, and recognizing the process that it takes to do that over the course of several years. I think that the landscape within a training center from year 1 in a quadrennial to year 4 in a quadrennial will obviously look very different in terms of, I would say, you know, that this past fall, we had a group of younger athletes, as well as some returning athletes, but who have shown, you know, exceptional capability in whether it be physiology or on the water skills. And we're trying to give them a foundational element to see if they can sort of push into the group as we move forward. As we move into year 3 and 4, that group will probably be a bit smaller, a little bit more select, and specifically those athletes that have demonstrated the ability up to that point to achieve the standards that were laid out earlier in the PowerPoint.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. All right, Casey, you're up.
In Sarasota, it mirrors again what both Boston and Princeton have said, but to simplify it, it's really to improve the skills and physical ability of those that have the capacity to be medalists at the Olympics. Those that show the interest in improving and making the necessary changes to also be competitive at that level. It is a daunting task for sure, and you have to be willing to, or be open to, making changes and improving your skill sets and your physiology to be competitive. It's not, we're trying to work on the Olympic medalist scale of quality versus what we've done in the past. So that's what we're doing in Sarasota.
Okay.
Brett, before we go on to the Q&A, can I ask a question to Peter and to Kate?
Please.
Peter, could you tell me what was your ERG score when you were 17?
When I was 17, it was 6:18.
What is it? What is your best?
5:47.
Yeah. Okay. Explain your pathway.
So I was recruited out of high school to row at Harvard, and I rowed there for 4 years. And then my senior year corresponded with the COVID pandemic, so that was canceled, and I had an extra year of eligibility. And I decided the best thing for me to do at that period of time was to do a graduate transfer and row at the University of Washington for that 5th year. And then after that year, I felt I was at the level where I was getting asked to join a training center. So then I moved down to California and joined what was at the time still the Oakland Training Center, and quickly transitioned into the California Rowing Club, where I rowed for the bulk of the Paris cycle, in addition to joining with the training camps and the team training with USRowing.
And Kate, what was your ERG score in 2023?
In 2023, it was like a 654, 652 maybe.
And
then came to the training center and then went 646.
yeah, but also you have to say in 23 I did not go to the World Championships because I still had to work on myself, and in the end you did a good job. Yeah.
Thank
What
you.
I'm trying to express with the questions is it's not always obvious. It's not always it's a lot of it is just believe in yourself. And before we go to the rest of the Q&A, I want to answer one question about how possible is a work schedule alongside training for the senior team. That's a very interesting question, and that's also one of my main concerns. What we would obviously, once you get to a certain level, you can get support, and you will be able to probably to cover part of your costs by an athlete stipend, and we are trying to increase that. We are trying to keep costs low for athletes, and we are trying to create opportunities also for housing for athletes who are at the training center. But in the end, we do understand that people need to live. So one of our projects currently is that we look into possibilities: A, increase stipends; B, find affordable housing for athletes; and C, work together with corporate partners to find jobs for people. It's called the Currents program, and that would offer opportunities. But not everybody right now is up to that, and I would think that it's not going to happen that you are going to be a medalist at the Olympics and until the day before the let's say until June you're working a full-time job. But it's not black and white. What I think is it's obvious when you're training at a level and you still have to make some steps. It's obvious that you need a job, and it's obvious that you need to earn money to pay your study debts, etc. We understand that, but from my perspective, we just try to see whether we can optimize and whether we can help. And obviously, that's one of the functions of our high performance partner clubs. They also look into how they can support you and how they can make life easier for you, or try to help you with finding jobs, etc. In the end, keep on dreaming. If you think that rowing can be done together with a full-time job, you have your career, you don't lose any time, and you still are going to be the best in the world. But there's many paths, and the best path is to make sure that you've got a stable life and that you've got a sound and a healthy body, and that you progress. And then, you know, the balance starts shifting a little bit over the years. So that's my answer. It is possible to have a job, but over the years it will change. In the chat, there was a question about training program. What we do is there's 2 Slack channels. Probably it makes sense, Brett, if you would put Will Daly's email in here.
Yes, absolutely.
There's one Slack channel for athletes where communication from our athletes council takes place, and where we try to give information that's important around selection procedures, town halls, etc. The other channel is for coaches. On the coaches channel, we publish our training program every time. So, and it gives you a good impression. And so normally I would think if you're a single athlete, probably you can reach out to Will Daly and or to Brett Gorman to get access. But I would think that if you've got a coach, that coach could simply be part of the Slack group for coaches, and then it will be accessible automatically.
Yeah, no, and I just want to mention, I'll put my email in here as well because I'm probably averaging, 4 to 5 athlete calls per week of athletes in this transition group for advice, like what are the right fits, whether it's, directing to a club, what are the different options, and then also so for some of those athletes, giving them access to the training plan. But I like to have a call first to make sure that, where is your training currently? Does it make sense for you to go ahead and start doing this? Do we need to adapt it? I think those are important questions to ask before we just blindly provide a training plan for people.
Yeah.
Great, so I'll put that in the
That was
chat.
the question in the chat, I believe. And then we've got Q&A open, correct?
Yeah, the second one in the chat was, how are the senior team standards for coastal rowing and beach sprints?
Oh, yeah.
That
Okay.
look-
That's an interesting one. Obviously, one could assume that the profile of people for beach sprints would be a little bit different. For 2025, pathway to the beach sprint team would be over trials, which means probably there's trials in singles. And after the but there's also the double and there's also the quad. This year we will fund also the quad. So based upon result, people will be invited to go to World Championships. So this year it's more about ID. There will be more ID camps organized this summer to offer opportunities for people to kind of find out whether beach sprint is something for them. And based upon that, we will probably like with flat water rowing, as we should call it now, although it's never flat. But so we will identify athletes, and we will also probably start a West Coast training center where we combine flat water rowing and beach sprints. But that is later. The question about the length of the course in the LA Games, that's an interesting one, because anything we do up till and including the final Olympic qualifier will be over 2K. There is not going to be any race over 1,500 meters until the Olympic year. So once you're qualified, which means after 2027, probably it makes sense for the boats that are qualified to look into that, because in the end, rowing will stay mainly aerobic, but it's obvious that that races will be shorter, and for men's eights it will be less than 4 minutes. So that is a difference, but that's something for the final preparation year, because in the end, before you can race, you have to qualify, and doesn't help you when you're leading all races in the qualification year at 1,500 and don't win them and don't qualify.
Great. Thank you for that. Next I see, let's go, I'm gonna just put this, I'm gonna go to Casey for the Sarasota Training Center. You said it was open for all athletes. Could you elaborate on that, as well as what is the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, all athletes being, any of the disciplines. We don't have a restriction on just men or women, for the senior Olympic team. But obviously, if you were a Paralympic athlete and the situation in Sarasota worked out, I don't know how it would work out better than being in Boston for you. But if it did, then you'd obviously, we want to support you in any way we can. Best way is to email. I think almost every email at USRowing is first name dot last name at usrowing.org. With Josy, myself, if you wanted to be in Sarasota, you can write to me or Josy and or copy one of us, and we can have a discussion, phone call, and go through what makes you eligible to be here and what the standards are to be here.
Yeah, exactly, because open to all athletes means all athletes of all gender and disciplines. It's not, there will be obviously there is some standards on what level people are, and I would assume that would be close to being in the national team or being part of the national team. The question about how partners are assigned for speed orders and trials, I give a good example. For instance, if the Columbia pair that rode under 23s last year and probably wants to give it a shot this year as well, if they show up at the speed order of trials, they are self-made, and I encourage everybody to you know, to find a combination that they can train in, because if we would just need to if we would just do a draw and put everybody together in different boats, that's not going to be helpful for the results. We assume that people connect. If you can't connect, if you don't have a coach, you can always reach out to one of the high performance clubs, because they also have got sometimes odd and sometimes even numbers. And the best way to you know, is to put yourself somewhere on the map and make sure that you connect to people. That's my advice on this.
I don't see any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A right now, but I would love to engage Peter and Kate for a question that I know I get a lot when I'm having calls with athletes, especially those that are still in college, on what are some of the biggest differences between both from a training perspective, collegiate versus senior team, and like what's that jump look like? What are some of the biggest differences, or maybe pieces of advice as well? So multifaceted questions, but Kate, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I think for me, especially last year, because it was the Olympic year, the biggest difference I noticed is like when you're in school, there's just a lot of other like distractions and things going on. Like you are in school and like you just have all the college experience. And I think like going then to the senior team, it can be like a lot of focus on rowing, especially if you don't have like a job. Like last year, I wasn't really working outside of rowing just because it was the Olympic year and that's like a little more common. So I would say just like having things to like balance out your life is super helpful. Like this year I'm working part-time. And I think that's like really reasonable in the first few years, especially, or just having like little hobbies and stuff that you're doing on the side is super helpful. Just so that you're not only focusing on rowing and going from like school to just rowing all the time.
Great. Peter, same question to you.
I'd agree with that. I'd also add that I think in the college programs, it's a little bit more structured, a little more hand-holding there. And when you go to the national team, you've got to be independently motivated. The volume and expectations of the training is going to increase significantly from that college to national team jump, and you've got to be prepared to be willing to do that, and also know how to handle it properly, so you're not getting injured or getting burnt out or whatever.
Okay. All right. It's like we had one more question come in, Josy, that about could you clarify how you calculate personal erg standard based on the 210 pound standard for plus or minus 6? Oh, you're muted. I'm sure it was brilliant what you said. I'm sure it was brilliant.
No, it was not brilliant. I would say if you can stall a little bit, I will throw the formula in here.
Okay, I can stall. Well then, Peter, I think you offered some good advice there towards the end of your answer. Kate, if you could offer one piece of advice to someone, you know, I think I'm speaking with a lot of college seniors that are, should I do this? Is this something I should invest in? You know, especially knowing that it is difficult to have a full-time job, and, you know, I think putting career on hold, life on hold. What would you say to that person?
I would say like if I could go back and give myself something, it would just be to like give everything time, because I think especially you go from being a senior in college, you're typically like kind of figured everything out by then. Maybe you're like at the top of your program and then you're entering a new chapter, and like every single person I know on the team has gone through like a little bit of a transition phase, and I think you kind of expect to go straight into it and have it all figured out and everything is just like smooth sailing. But I think it's totally like normal, and I know I had a little bit of period of like figuring everything out. And there's a reason that it's like a 4-year cycle, and like whether you're joining at the last year or at the beginning, a lot of times like it does take multiple years, or like I didn't make the team the year before the Olympics, and I think that's really normal. Like a lot of people come in and don't make the team straight away. So just to kind of like, it's weird because in college, if you don't make the boat for NCAAs, you're still like on the team. And it can feel a little bit different like at this level, but I think just like knowing that you're still on the right path, like regardless.
Great, thank you. Awesome. Jesse and Casey, all this next one that's in the chat, I'm going to throw to the two of you. For someone who has, taken, maybe they decided for whatever reason, whether it's they pursued work, grad school, whatnot, personal reasons, didn't continue training post-collegiately, but now have been getting back into it. Is there an age limit for getting back into senior training? Jesse, I'll go to you first.
I mean, I would say that there's no cap. I mean, we had multiple athletes in Paris who were over the age of 35. I think the standard is the standard. If you're approaching that or moving in that direction, then this is a reality. I think age is not the limiting factor. Your capacity is.
Ooh, that's a good soundbite. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got very good examples of Americans as well as foreign athletes. I think Megan Musnicki is a great example of one of the fittest athletes in our team last year, maybe the fittest athlete at, let's say she was not 18 anymore, but she can beat any 18-year-old on the water and on the erg. And basically, you should also consider what is your athletic age, because if you start at age 10 and you train for 15 years, probably you are like worn out more than somebody who starts as a walk-on at age 18 or 20, has a couple of years off, is now 30. And so it all depends on your motivation. Yeah, and somebody gave the example of Molly Rackford or Michelle Saxer for that. It's there's many, by the way, yeah, the comeback kid is Molly, that is correct. And so age is not a limitation. There's two questions in the Q&A. One about how is injury dealt with on the senior team. Well, Kate?
I think that I found like the team is super accommodating with injury. When I came in, I was a few months back from having back surgery, and so I had to do a lot of modifications, whether it was like biking for a lot of workouts, erging on sliders, and I think almost like even more so than in school, just because in school you have such a like limited time frame. People are really invested in like the longevity of everyone and making sure that you're able to be in the sport for a long period of time. We have PTs that you can access. I go a couple times a week, and I think people on the team take it really seriously. And one difference I found from college to here is like everyone gets to practice super early. They're like warming up, doing their PT constantly, just super on top of all that. And I think, yeah, everyone's really helpful, whether you need to like get scans done or just have a personalized PT program made for you.
Yeah. Basic to this is also if somebody has an injury, it's not that we are 24/7 in a selection situation. So we can assume that if we want people to be good at the right point. And so sometimes in the end you have to select, but it's not 24/7 and it's not 12 months out of 12. So that's about that question. There's a question about, I remember something being said about gauging your own potential with something about 1%. I don't understand the question, or maybe I'm not a native speaker, as some of you might know.
I'm not sure what that's referring to either. If whoever put that, it says anonymous, but whoever put that in, if you could clarify.
Yeah, well, anyway, if I look at my best athletes in the past, I know that in average, a progression of 1% a year of my best group is feasible in speed on the erg, in speed on the water. It's not in average for everybody. And when you're very, very, very far away, 1% is not enough. And sometimes there's bigger margins to win. But consider 1% to be like an improvement of 4 seconds a year on the erg. That is an option and a possibility. improving your best time in the single if conditions are even by the same time, by the same margin. That's not strange. I hope that was enough of an answer. The final question is, how does the process work for coxswains? Brad, maybe you can elaborate on what we expect from coxswains.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple different areas. I mean, I think our number one criteria is international race experience. That you've already had some international race experience once you get to the senior team, which that is a super high bar. So what does that look like? Obviously, a U23 or U19 experience where you've already raced at world championships or world university games. There's an example of an athlete that went on to seniors who their first international race was through world university games experience. We would also consider Royal Henley over in the UK as an internet, especially if it's a competitive crew and a competitive event. We'd consider that an international experience. But if you don't have that, it's hard for us. What criteria do we have? How are we going to assess that? For U23s, we do recruit from NCAA IRA finals, looking for coxswains who are competing at that level and really understand the speed of the boat. And actually, Jesse, I'd love for you to say a couple comments on that, because you were one of the first people that I spoke to about that, where, it's so important that the coxswains, it's like driving a Ferrari versus a Prius. Like it's very different.
I mean, I think you summed up pretty
good.
much exactly what I said. I mean, you have to experience going the speed necessary to have a clear understanding of what that type of boat feels like, right? Coxswains like to talk all the time about how they can feel the boat in order to be able to give feedback. Well, until you've sat in a boat that is, close to the standard or at the standard that we're trying to move, that experience is vital in order to be able to step into that role and quickly be able to be an asset.
Yeah. Brad, I don't see open questions.
There's one in the chat that I don't know the answer to, and it's, can you visit the training centers?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
I do think what I want to encourage is, let's put it this way. Obviously, you can assume that people, that we are open to offer people access to train a couple of days at a training center, etc. However, it depends on time of year. That's one thing. I would also argue that having a conversation with either head coaches of high performance partner clubs or head coaches of training center to put yourself on the map and to explore opportunities, that it's very very important, because it's not just a 2K. I gave that answer before. It's not just a 2K. It's also probably just what your coach thinks of you. It's probably what your skill set is, what your trajectory has been so far up to there, which makes, and just what we did last year is we had some people train a certain period before full speed orders in Princeton, and that makes sense, just leading up to the speed orders, because then you've got an event. No, that was my answer. Was that the last question?
No, there's still a couple coming in, and one's for Peter.
Yeah, because I wanted also Peter and Kate to have time to explain how people can reach out to athlete commission, council, etc.
Yeah, so we'll do this question. So, what kind of environment did you find you gained the most skill and speed in the years leading up to the Olympic year?
I would say the environment is definitely when you surround yourself with the best people. So from coaches to athletes, I always look to put myself in a situation where I was training with guys who are better than me. Pretty simple. I think when you're training people who are better than you, it raises the standard and lets you know what the standard was. So I think, especially in the Olympic year, coming back at CRC, we had 3 of the guys from the 4 who just won a silver medal at the World Championship. So I think training with them is pretty clear what the standard was going to be if you wanted to get on the podium. So I think it helped myself and the other guys who wanted to get there to see what the level required was.
I did get an offline question that I'll give to, Casey, I'll come to you, for, given that the second selection camp is in July, is later in the summer, what kind of standards are you going to be, do you foresee college athletes partaking in that, and what kind of standards will you be looking for?
I think the standards are pretty laid out by Josy in that sheet. Obviously successful experience, international helps. All those things, all of them are variables that can be like, can overlook other variables. Like if somebody asked if height was a factor. If you're short and you're fast and you row well and you move a boat well, then you're going to have a shot. If you're tall and we don't know anything about you, you'll be given an opportunity, maybe not for selection camp, or maybe so, but an invite to camp so that we can see what your capacity is, right? So all of these things have variables, or variables that are involved. College athletes, I would hope that you're aged out. I know that I've spoken to some college athletes that have not aged out and are looking to move on, but we've discussed, if you're looking for a challenge that's not whatever the selection camp was offering, medaling in a small boat at World Championships would be a good way to be invited to camp. The timing doesn't exactly work for going to U23 Worlds and then coming to selection camp, but selection camp 2, a lot of the Olympic athletes will be returning. Some of those athletes will be, and then we'll have the young athletes. So you're going to have to have something to show to be invited, and whether that's a speed order result that you showed yourself in. Like if you weren't scared away from participating in a speed order because you were worried about your result, those are the things that will help determine an invite.
And I think there's a question that came through in the Q&A that I think relates to this, where it's, it's asking if there are going to be invitations for that, but it's, submit testing. That was on the entry point slide, and get in touch. Please, get in touch. We need to know who you are. We're not going to know to invite you if we don't have that information. There isn't an open application for the second selection camp unless there's that, or will there be, Josy?
Good question. In principle, we think that we know the people that are of value, but I do not mind if people have an open application, because everybody gets an answer. And it's obvious that, again, we cannot see everybody. So maybe somebody who has, doesn't have the right environment because it's a lone person, etc. But it might be of interest. So application, if you want to come to the second selection camp, make sure that if by the end of May you have not heard from us, that you make yourself heard. Why do I say end of May? It means basically I want to be sure that at the end of the first selection camp and before the tour we go to Europe, everybody knows who, whether there's an option or possibility to come to the second selection camp or not.
Mm-hmm.
Could I make one comment about, being identified that Josy brought up? Not everybody is recruited. You still have to apply and make yourself known, right? Like I worked for a company once that, everybody wants to work for, and they said, how'd you get that job? And I said, I filled out an application, right? You're not always being recruited for the top place. You need to present yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And since we are answering that way, I would say that if you want to be invited for the selection camp for women, it will be applied to Josy.Foglia@USRowing.org, or Casey. I pressed enter, so now only Jesse's in the chat. Or Casey.Galvanek@USRowing.org.
But I think what's important here is also what Jesse said before in relation to the question of are you too old? It's like, if you're hitting the standards, It doesn't matter if you're on the young side or the old side. The standard is the standard. So selection camp, the second selection camp is not a development camp.
Yes, but if you hit the standard, that means that you have to be like 555 or below, so 3%.
Mhm.
Yeah, weight corrected. But basically, if that's the only thing, there's probably 100 people in the US who can beat that. And then it is helpful to have some more information because we are not going to invite 100 people. So the question of what is good to see if your training is improving, I would always say small boat speed. Because if I would say that it's your ERG score, I don't care if your ERG score goes down by 20 seconds. If your boat speed stays the same, it's not really helpful. Yeah. So in the end, expose yourself to competition is the best way to find out.
And just to add to the boat thing, and I mean, Kate, I would encourage you to kind of chime in on this just because you've had the experience now, and Peter as well. But I think when Josy alludes to small boat skill, you should look at it as true small boat skill, and that means that you should be competent in both sweep rowing and sculling, regardless if your dream is to make an 8 or a 4 or a pair. Like every athlete's path needs to revolve around understanding how to do both disciplines. So if you again, foresee yourself as a sweep rower, that does not mean that you are only ever training in a pair.
Yeah, rowing a single, even if you're not that great in rowing a single, but it offers you the opportunity to increase your own skills and to work on yourself. There's nobody to shout at, so the only person guilty of the speed is yourself.
Right. I think why don't we go ahead and invite Kate and Peter to come in about how to get in touch with Athlete Commission and the groups that they work with. Council, Athlete Council.
Yeah, I can put we can both put our emails in the chat, and I think Molly's also on here, and she's another female athlete rep. And you're can feel free to email. I'm happy to chat with anyone over the phone or answer your questions on email if that's helpful.
Okay, that's great. I guess Josy, Casey, Ellen, Jesse, final thoughts before I just go to a couple reminders of some upcoming deadlines. Casey, I'll go to you first.
Really, I think a lot of it was covered. I think, well, the coxswain thing, I would like to say, I get contacted a lot about coxswains, and I know you have, they've contacted you. Obviously the international experience is a plus or a must, but then also still sending recordings. I don't know if that you have a process, Brett, that I'm just not recalling for somebody to submit recordings, but you can always email them. Practice 6K, 2K recordings, listen to them. Obviously there needs to be something that we can make some judgments on, right? I know athletes get tired of hearing your body of work, but we need to see something. If you say, oh, I coxed at this international race and we won Henley, so what? I don't know. You got to fit, you got to answer the questions, you got to be good for the crew. Sometimes you are great for your crew and your recordings show that, but you're not great for the crew that we're working with. So you have to be a little flexible, and we need to be able to figure out whether you'll work or fit or not.
Yep. We do submissions for U23s and U19, but I don't have a senior submission. Ellen, would you like to speak to that?
Not that point particularly, but I just make a comment about sort of that that pathway. I think Jesse kind of mentioned it. I mean, in Boston, it's unique because there's so many boathouses on the one river that there is opportunity to join in with the training center group on a couple of mornings a week. We want open up the group to either U23 who are training in the area. So there is possibility to mix in with the training center group a couple of days a week. So if you're an athlete that's in the Boston area that is trying to break onto the scene, you still feel free to contact me. Even if that means you may not be fully officially on the training center roster, it's still a good opportunity to test your speed among some of the other elite scullers that are in town, and just encourage people to do that and to reach out.
Right. Jesse, any final thoughts or anything you want to share?
No, I think I covered everything.
Okay, Josy, I'll give it to you last.
Yeah. The only thing I need to repeat sometimes, and I also need to repeat for myself, is there's no shortcut. Going to a training center does not really make you better from one day on the other day. There's a natural progression and you need to put in the right amount of work. So yeah, sure, you can combine a full-time job, but probably your pathway will be a little bit longer. Sure, you can train full-time, but still, you cannot just do the work that you need to do over years within 1 year. We find that most athletes at the highest level are 28 in average or older. What does it mean? You, when you're graduating this year, are probably the target group for LA 28 because you will be more or less around that age for then. But still, that means you still got like 3 to 4 years to go, which is not discouraging, but is a fact. So that means it's not that it will be happening in 1 day. Be patient and make sure that you make progress because then you will get your opportunities.
Play the long game. Play the long
Yeah. Shortened up a bit to 1500, but still a long game.
Great. Well, just a couple of reminders for me. For those of you that are U23 age eligible, we're approaching the U23 application deadline. I'll put that in the chat. That's March 15th when that needs to be in. I will also include the information for World University Games for those that are aged out or those that maybe aren't going to be extended invites to U23s. So those are upcoming. I want to thank everyone, thank our panelists for all of their work for this presentation and to answer questions. Thank you, Kate and Peter, for being here to give a little bit of an athlete perspective. And we had very good representation. This was a very well-attended meeting, so I appreciate everyone's time on this Tuesday night. This has been recorded and will be posted on the website. If send it to your friends, and it will be posted by end of day tomorrow. But I think that's it from us. So thank you all. Have a good night and good luck this spring. And happy racing, everybody.